Welcome to the Drum Shuffle, a podcast offering insights, perspectives, and conversations for drummers. With your host, Jamie Eads. Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 1 of the Drum Shuffle. I'm Jamie Eads. As a brand new podcast, let me take a moment to give a quick overview of our goals for this show, or our mission statement really. I've been a drummer for the past 28 years, and about 25 of those years I've been playing professionally, so I've been very lucky. When I started, I wish there would have been something like this podcast, or what I hope this podcast to become. My life revolves around basically 3 things, and has always revolved around these 3 things: my family, drums and drumming, and music in general. I suspect that most of you tuning in are huge music lovers or drummers, or are just really interested in what drummers talk about. So it's my sincere hope to be able to share some real-world tips, tricks, and advice with other drummers, musicians, and music lovers around the globe. Our goal for the Drum Shuffle is to help fellow drummers further their careers, improve their sound, both live and in the studio, learn about awesome new gear. Who doesn't love new gear? And really hear from some of the best drummers, gear companies, producers, managers, industry insiders, and other fellow musicians from around the globe through the show's guest interviews. Certainly, thank you for listening, and I really hope you enjoy the show. Okay, now that we have that out of the way, I don't want to waste any time getting to today's interview. I'm really pumped to have one of my longtime drum brothers and a truly great friend to me on as the very first guest of the Drum Shuffle, Brian LaRue. Brian is the Director of U.S. Operations for Dream Cymbals and Gongs, located in Toronto, Canada. So let's welcome Brian to the Drum Shuffle. Brian, man, how's it going?
Good, Jamie. It's getting going. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, finally waking up, finishing coffee. That stuff happens. So.
A man after my own heart, drinking coffee at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I love it. So, hey, I wanted to say thanks for your time and talking with us here on the Drum Shuffle. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. It's a great pleasure. Glad to be your first guest. That's an honor, man. Trust me.
Well, we wouldn't have it any other way. You and I go way, way back, so I wanted to make sure you got on the show right off the top. So let me ask you this. Give us and our listeners a little bit of your background. Now, I know you're a drummer, which is always cool, to have a drummer on as the first guest of a drum show, but tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I got into drumming when I was about 8-9 years old. Just kind of the pastor actually at the church I was attending had a drum set in his office, and he used to let me come in and bang around on it, and it's kind of stuck with me. Then when kind of fast forward a little bit, when I was getting into middle school and the band program was available, my sisters had always played saxophone, clarinet, flute, different things. So I grew up in a band background. So, of course, I wanted to jump into it. And because we didn't have drums available, my parents kind of forced me to play clarinet. And it was a good, learning experience. I got to learn about reading music and different things like that. That differed from what would happen in the percussion section. But after breaking 6 clarinets, they kind of surrendered and gave up. Well, 8th grade, I started playing drums, and there we go.
Well, that's pretty awesome. We'll have to talk offline about how you break 6 clarinets. That seems like some sort of record to me.
Oh, I can say it in one simple word: bleachers.
Oh, I got you. Okay. Well, it happens.
Amazing what happens when you drop one off the top bleacher.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you must not have been a very good clarinet player if they had you on the top of the bleachers. You know, you weren't down front with the good clarinet players. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I never did take to that.
Oh, I kid, I kid. So you've been a drummer for most of your life.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about how you got into the career that you're in now. I know you didn't start, right off the bat at Dream Cymbals and Gongs. Tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get into the gear companies? Was it just sort of your first job out of college, or did you, accidentally fall into it? Tell us how you got where you're at today.
I think saying accidentally fell into it is kind of a good description. I have always been a little bit of a gear nerd and have always been very fortunate to have had great drum shops around me that let me hang out, let me poke at things, and let me take things apart and let me fix things. So I'd say it kind of happened. First drum shop I used to hang out at was, if I remember correctly, Probeat Drum Shop, which was owned by a guy named Carl Peterson, who actually later went on to to be the guy who created the Masterworks program for Curl. Um,
Oh, wow.
Carl used to let me hang out in his shop. He used to let me, fix drum sets, things like that. And then when him and his wife Debbie closed down the store, another friend of mine introduced me to 2112 Percussion, which eventually became kind of like my home away from home for many, many, many years. And Steve let me come in at Christmas, put together drum sets. He buy me hot dogs. It's kind of one of those trade-off things. And slowly but surely, I kind of earned my place there. And I was working at a movie theater, and one day Whit called and said, "Hey, Jeremy's going on the road. You want a gig?" And I took it. So just kind of, spent years working at the shop, spent years hanging out with the various teachers, going out on the road doing tech work for different people, just really absorbing as much of the music scene as I could. And eventually a position opened up at Pintech Electronic Percussion, which electronic drums and electronic percussion and MIDI and the whole kind of scene back then was like a big passion of mine. And they offered me an opportunity to come in and work in R&D, and I took it. And kind of the rest is history.
Cool. Awesome. So, after your time at Pintech, in efforts of full disclosure, I am an artist on the Dream Cymbals roster. That's how we met.
Yep.
I know that Dream is currently celebrating their 10th anniversary of being in business. So how long have you been at Dream, and how did you end up with those guys?
After I left Pintech, I was been recruited by Ray Ayotte to work for Thai Drums out in California. So I moved out there, spent a year out working in the offices out there, kind of doing what I could, and eventually just decided California really wasn't where I wanted to be. So I moved back east to North Carolina, and I ran the Thai offices from North Carolina for probably about 3 or 4 years, and just got to a point where I needed a change of scenery. So I actually left Thai and started a rep firm called LaRue Sales. And I didn't know Andy or didn't know really anything about Dream, but I knew Ryan and Darren with Mountain Rhythm, which were kind of, at that point, was kind of the sister company to Dream. And I called them and said, "Hey guys, I know your drums. I'm trying to do this. Can I sell your stuff?" And they were like, they were really cool about it. And they also opened up Dream to me as a possible option. It's like, "Hey, well, you can do Mountain Rhythm drums and you can do Dream cymbals," which was great. I also picked up Premiere. I had Silver Fox drumsticks, Drum Fun learning CDs and stuff like that. So just basically building a small catalog. And I did that from April 2008 till basically October. And in October, Andy had kind of, I guess, come to terms with different things within the business and was ready to separate from Mountain Rhythm to see if, Dream could grow on its own. And he called me, said, "Hey, This is what's going to happen. This is what's going on. Do you want to be part of it? And I have to say it's probably the easiest yes I've ever said, and probably the most important yes I've ever said. And from that point on, it basically was me and him. It was the two of us.
No doubt about it. So, can you give us some insight to the company history of Dream? Obviously, you mentioned Andy. We're talking about Andy Morris, who's the founder and owner of Dream. Give us a little bit of history on how Dream came to be.
Well, I'm not sure exactly what the exact time frame was. Somewhere around 2005, in that neighborhood, 2004, 2005. Andy and one of the old business partners, Stephen Eilhart, were, as far as I know, touring China and doing. They're both professional musicians. Probably were playing on an orchestra, and they found this factory where they were, building gongs and things like that. And of course, that's a big thing for Andy. Is he's a big gong guy, especially in the orchestral side of the world. So they had asked them to try and make some Western style cymbals, and they did. Apparently, they were not bad. And like you said, some of the details are a little bit gray for me. Just hearing them side from different people, side to side kind of thing. But from that point, from what I understand, is they basically created the Bliss line, and then the contacts kind of came about shortly thereafter. The Energy was a completely different cymbal than what you actually see today. Different logos, different. I mean, they were brilliant, for lack of any. There you go. They were brilliant. They were heavy. They were cast in a different way than our regular cymbals are, and they'd created some lines. And in the early days when I first came on board, the company, like I said, been around by that point for a few years. I was kind of, I guess, fine tuning the instruments. But we didn't even actually have anything other than crash rides in the early days. There were some hi-hats, there were Bliss hi-hats. But everything was crash ride. It was 16 and 17, 18, 19, 20, 22, they were all crash rides. And slowly over time, just as the company grew and grew and grew, the lines kind of developed further. We added ride cymbals in, splash cymbals. Really fine-tuned what we were doing with the Bliss and the Contact and the Energies. And it's just kind of grown from really infinitesimal stages. And like I said, it wasn't even, I don't think, a planned thing to do with cymbal company. It just people believed in the instruments. The instruments got better. Eventually, Andy bought out Stephen and all the other partners in the business, and now he is the sole owner. And that kind of brings us to where we are today. Celebrating our 10th anniversary with the new limited edition ride cymbals coming out, and then just a lot of fun family camaraderie at the NAMM show. And it's been a really good ride.
Sure. Well, speaking of NAMM, as we're recording this, just post NAMM, I guess it was last week. Tell us a little bit about. You mentioned the 10th anniversary cymbal. Really like for our listeners to understand what that is. So that was kind of the big new product at NAMM for this year for Dream Cymbals. Tell us a little bit about that project and where folks can find those.
Well, they're being done in a very, very limited quantity. Officially, there are 150 that were produced, 50 for artists, 100 for worldwide retail. Of those 100 that are available for retail, 60 of them are coming to the North American market. So we'll have those in the U.S. I think Canada gets 10 for themselves, but I haven't heard the final numbers on that. So yeah, they'll be available at dealers around the country. They're going to street price for around $429. And what they are a limited edition serialized cymbal that was hand patinated by one of a handful of various Dream staff members. And by that, they use different kind of acids, different kind of materials and things like that to actually change the top finish of the cymbal. They're based on a small bell flat Contact 24. It's got great bow, great crash, great bell. But beyond that, they're just really beautiful pieces of artwork.
I've been fortunate to see some sneak previews of these guys, I'm going to boast a little bit here and say mine should be on its way anytime, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. So, thank you guys for that. But
Absolutely, man. Thank you for being part of the family.
Oh man, I love being part of the Dream family. With that being said, if the listeners haven't seen these things yet, they literally, not only do they sound great and you can play them, but when you pick one of these up, I think a lot of folks are probably going to frame them or hang it on their wall as a piece of art. They're literally that beautiful. So with that being said, it's just really amazing, and I know that Andy and Julia and some other folks on the Dream staff have really been hard at work doing the artistry to make them look the way they look. So if you haven't checked these out, please do so. So I'll switch gears just a little bit, Brian.
Sure.
I know the answer to this, but our listeners may not. What makes Dream Cymbals so different and unique from other manufacturers?
Well, it's a twofold answer. Cymbal-wise, for cymbal's sake, the manufacturing process really makes one of the biggest differences. It's what gives them their character, it's what gives them their sound, and kind of gives them the texture that you get when you play them. We make them the way they did 100 years ago versus the way a lot of manufacturers make them now, which they'll cast their ingot, but then they run it through a machine, which actually, flat presses it into basically a wafer-thin object before shaping. We actually still pull ours under a gigantic hammer while they're still molten hot with tongs to basically get them into a flat form before they actually go into hand shaping, which makes a huge difference when you get down to the character of the cymbal and the overtones and the way they sound. Beyond that, what makes Dream different from a lot of the other cymbal companies is honestly the staff. The people that actually are running the company, the way the company's run. I mean, it makes a difference. We treat everybody like family. It's even down to our smallest dealer. We care about what they think about the company, how they view what we do as a company. And honestly, it's just we try to be a very ethical company and a very transparent company, with everybody. I mean, artists, dealers, anybody. And I think that does make a huge difference. It's it gives a little bit of a personal touch to what a lot of people just consider just to be business. So I think that does make us stand out a little bit. There's also the other great things like the recycling program. The fact that we as a company have worked very hard to make our manufacturing process ecologically friendly. It's all little things, but it all makes a difference.
Absolutely. And, I was going to bring up the recycling program. Tell us a little bit about how that works when you go into an authorized Dream dealer.
Basically, we will buy anybody's broken cymbal as long as it's not brass for $1 an inch, and they're able to use that credit towards the purchase of any Dream product. From the consumer perspective of it, they're taking something that was broken and ultimately, hopefully, at some point, turning it into something that will be, another useful, valuable instrument to somebody else. They're also getting, great product for great value. So there's two benefits. From the dealer perspective, they're able to take in this broken metal, which will give them credit for, and they're able to then purchase Dream product, which, they sell, they make money on it, but the initial purchase price was already credited. So they're getting, in essence, money for free. So it works out both ways.
Absolutely. So if I'm understanding correctly, what you're saying is if I have a couple of 20-inch ride cymbals laying around that are broken or they're just no longer of any use to me, instead of having to deal with Craigslist or eBay or something like that, I can take those two 20-inch ride cymbals into an authorized Dream dealer and give them to the dealer and get $40 off towards the purchase of a Dream product. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And then on the back side of it, what we do with the actual materials when they come back to us, any cymbal that has a 14-inch area that's usable or larger ends up going to a water jet facility and is cut a couple of times and turns into the base materials for the crop circles, the naughty saucers, and the re-effects bells.
So you guys are
so you're getting credit, and then we're able to use the material to make something new.
Absolutely. So just because it's a broken cymbal doesn't mean you guys are throwing it in the trash someplace, which is something that I find just totally cool that you guys do, is the fact that you're actually putting that metal to use for a new instrument that will go to a good home eventually, we hope.
Absolutely. And even the scrap stuff that we can't really use much for or use much to do anything with, we actually melt that stuff down and they become crotales.
Oh,
so we try to use as much of it as possible. So, yeah.
That's fantastic. So there's no need for people to take their broken cymbals and have a big round of death frisbee or anything like that in the backyard. They can they can actually put these things to work and have them rehomed eventually by Dream, which is I think it's just super cool and you know, kudos to you guys for doing it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So switch gears a little bit here again. We've heard some words like bliss, contact, energy. Those are the different lines that Dream has. And then there's some, you know, subcategories within those lines. You know, one of the things that I wanted to ask was, you know, who are your cymbals for? What applications, etc. So, you know, for me personally, I would love to hear you talk a little bit about the dark matter cymbals and that process, because I think it's really unique. And quite honestly, a lot of companies are now trying to copy that. But you guys were really innovators with the dark matter stuff. But, you know, just real quick, if you can say, okay, if you're a jazz drummer, here's the line that you're probably going to lean towards. If you're a rock guy, this is the line you're probably going to look at the hardest, etc. But especially tell us about the dark matter line. I think our listeners will be really curious to hear about that.
I guess I can go ahead and start. I'll start with the dark matters because you're right. It's an interesting process that they go through. The initial concept behind the dark matter series was just honestly trying to refire some of the cymbals that we'd already manufactured, just to see what would happen. Think of it as a phoenix rising from the ashes, so to speak. And I think that was really kind of the concept in the beginning. So what we did was we took a batch of energies. The line started out with the ERI 20s, ERI 22s, and the ECR 16s and 18s. And what we did was we took them, stuck them back in the fire, brought them back up to molten temperatures. Once they came out, they were then retempered, rehammered, and basically left dirty, which is why they have the kind of black characteristics that they do, is because that's actually from the fire. They're not relathed. They're not, there's nothing crazy. They're not reshaped or anything like that. It's just the simple tempering process, which brings the pitch down, changes some of the overtones, again, along with the rehammering, and they kind of became what they were. So we kept them around as far as the line went, and kind of expanded into the small bell or the flat earth 20s and 22s, which were essentially small bell flat 20s and 22s that were originally produced, but we didn't put out because when we decided to do the 24s, they took off. So we just kind of kept the bliss and contacts at 24s. However, somebody at the factory decided to fire them, and they came out beautifully. So we added those to the line. The moon rides, which are unlike a lot of the other dark matters, they are completely unlathed to begin with. There's no secondary process that goes along with them. They're just essentially anvils with tone, which is kind of how the concept happened. I had asked Andy to make me a really, really heavy ride because we didn't have anything that kind of matched that in our catalog. And he created something for me, which I currently have sitting in my cymbal bag, which is a dark matter moon ride that is a 22-inch and has roughly an 8.5 to 9-inch bell. It looks completely freakish sitting next to one of the current actual but that's kind of where it started. It took about 3 years before he actually brought it over from the factory, because it basically just sounded like garbage, according to him. And eventually it took tone. Go figure. One day it sounded good, so yeah, I brought it back. And well, like I said, it's not the production model. Mine's considerably flatter with this gigantic, massive like thing sitting on top of it. But we figured it out, and they became, kind of the weird oddball, redheaded stepchild of the dark matter line. Because, like I said, unlike everything else, they're in no way, shape, or form reheated or anything like that. They're just a gigantic mass of metal.
Right. Well, and I've heard those guys and tried them out, and if you're playing some hardcore metal, that's the ride for you, no doubt about it. Because
it's a grindcore, baby.
Yeah, I don't care how many Marshall stacks you have on the stage, you will hear the moon ride through those stacks, guaranteed. It's
yeah, I would say it's a beast.
Well, you took the word right out of my mouth. It is definitely a beast. And, personally, I'm playing a 22-inch dark matter energy ride, which was my first Dream cymbal. And I think I purchased that way back, 5 years ago. And
something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and it is still my go-to ride. I have other ride cymbals from Dream. I have an Eclipse ride, which is kind of, a half dark matter. It was a prototype that you guys graciously sold to me. But the dark matter energy, every studio session I go play, I will try different rides, and every engineer, every producer always says, nope, use that one, the dark one. It just sounds great in the studio. It sounds great live. Fantastic cymbal. So thanks for making those for all of us.
Absolutely. And it's an interesting thing. You were asking for comparisons on different lines on what type of drummer might be attracted to which line. And it's an interesting, this is an interesting way to segue into that conversation, especially after the Dark Matters, because the Dark Matter energy ride is honestly one of the most popular rides that we have across multiple platforms of music, across different genres. It's kind of become like a go-to for a lot of guys. I mean, you being a rock guy, I've got metal guys that play them. I've got jazz guys that play them, honestly. So it's in some ways hard to say which line a drummer might be attracted to. It kind of falls into the way we set up our pricing too. Originally, when Dream was founded, yes, we had separate lines, kind of in the sense of Bliss was one price point, Contact was one price point, Energy was one price point, Dark Matters fell into it, and they became a different price point. And what we kept finding was that drummers weren't necessarily picking cymbals based on what they were hearing. They were picking cymbals based on, it could be a jazz guy, but he wanted a Contact, but he had cash for the Bliss. So that's what he ended up with.
Right.
So in a lot of ways, when we first started out, Bliss was always the most popular line. Not necessarily just because of sound, but honestly because of price. And as we adjusted to the sound pricing policy that we've got, where it's based literally on what you're hearing, because Bliss is the same price as Contact now. Contact's the same price as Energy now. It's the same thing. The only ones that really have a different price point at all are Dark Matters, and processing more than anything else. But
it's because they
found that
it's because they go through a different process, and it takes a lot longer to make a Dark Matter than it does a Bliss. Am I correct in saying that?
Absolutely. They actually aged the Dark Matters a little bit. They're hanging out way before we actually get them into production, because they do take a little bit of time to mature after the second firing. Because it stresses the metal to no end. I mean, you're taking it from a finished product and bringing it back to literally red hot molten temperatures, before tempering it again and all of that. So it is, so that's the reason there's a little bit of a higher price point for that. And it's not even that much. It's, it's nominal when you get down to the prices of other cymbals against comparison pricing. But what we've found is, since we've changed our price policies, that the spectrum of cymbals have really opened up to more drummers, regardless of genre, honestly. It's in some cases You've got guys that are playing Bliss that are in metal bands. You've got a lot of gospel guys that are using Bliss or Contact in combination because of what type of room they're in, what they're trying to fill. You've got rock guys that play Dark Matter and Bliss and then Contact thrown in for fun. It's interesting. I can't say that any one cymbal is geared towards any certain application. I think it's all based on what the drummer's listening to and what they want to hear when they're performing.
Well, and that's the thing that drew me to Dream to begin with. And there was a really big Americana record that came out in 2013, and at the time, the guy that played on that record, whom I'm not going to name, was with Dream at that time. And I reached out to him and I said, my God, what are those cymbals on that record? And he said, it's a Dream Dark Matter ride. I think he was playing a really big Bliss crash. So my first foray was the ride cymbal, and my setup has evolved over time over the past 5 years. But I'm using a combination of Dark Matter, Energy, Bliss. I've got some Contacts in my bag. So to your point, I'm using cymbals from across all of your product lines. Not to mention, the crop circle, I've got a couple of those laying around. I've got a Pang, China type cymbal. You've got the Libor Hadrava, stack of effects cymbals, which is kind of a, either a crash or a splash with a little tiny, inverted Pang cymbal on it for really cool effects. So, my cymbal bag is full of Dream stuff from across all the lines. And as you and I joke a lot of times, not to take anything away from our guitar playing brethren, but if a guitar player's playing a blue guitar, it's because it was $50 cheaper than the red one.
Exactly.
So we, as drummers, I think, have a little bit more unique perspective in that, it's what does it sound like and what is the application? Not saying guitar players don't do that, but for us, we can't change our cymbals out between songs. So we
Exactly.
have to find that spectrum that's going to work for whatever gig we're on or whatever studio session we're on. So it's really cool that me as a drummer, I can say, okay, how much does a 20-inch crash ride cost? And it's going to be the same price across the lines.
Exactly.
So I can find the cymbal that works best for my application, pick that up, and it's not, I don't have to sacrifice the sound I need based on my pocketbook. Which is awesome. So, Brian, tell us a little bit about the dealer network for Dream. If I'm listening in, Kalamazoo, Michigan, or Phoenix, Arizona, where do I go to figure out where my local Dream dealer is located?
Well, we've got a dealer locator on the website, which is actually kept up to date pretty much monthly, thanks to Julia. And you can go on there, check by zip code, check by city, state, and definitely can find somebody somewhere. And if you can't, reach out to your local music store and find out why you can't. We had a lot of guys come up to the show this year that said they put out, the question on social media. It's like, hey, what should we be carrying? And I was honestly surprised how many people came through the booth and said that we were the answer. It's like, you're not carrying this, we want this product. That's how that kind of stuff happens. Reach out to your local music store and ask them if you can't find us. The other thing is we've got a lot of great online retailers like Chicago Music Exchange, Casio Interstate Music, Arizona Pro Drum Shop, GearTree.com. And those guys can always help you find stuff. If you can't find it locally, you can always find it there.
That's fantastic. And, just to mention it, the website is dreamcymbals.com. So
yes.
be sure to hit the Dream Cymbals website. And folks, feel free to reach out to me as well if you're having a hard time finding these in your local music store. And I will pass that information on to Brian. I'm sure you are always interested to know that somebody's looking for your product in a particular geographic location so that you guys can go scope out the music stores. So feel free to reach out to me. My email address is thedrumshufflepodcast@gmail.com. So we'll be happy to forward those emails on to Brian.
You can also reach out to Ed Squires on our social media network as well, via Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, or anything. He's always out there looking for info and passes it on too.
Absolutely, and Ed is a great guy, and we're very hopeful that we can get Ed to share links to the podcast here to all
Absolutely.
of the dream lovers out there, so that we can spread the word about what we're trying to do with the podcast, and the outreach and education that we're hoping to provide to drummers. So, Brian, again, I appreciate your time, but I do want to switch gears just a little bit here one more time. Love talking about gear, love talking about Dream Cymbals, but we are all dying to know, who are your favorite drummers, your favorite bands? What really gets you going in the morning? What do you put on your iPhone or your big stereo system to get the blood pumping every morning?
It could be anything. Usually it's children yelling. But honestly, as far as drummers go,
you live in that house too, then, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. No, as far as drummers go, man, honestly, I've had some favorites over the years for varying reasons. Different bands I've, been into for, one reason or another. And, honestly, it's kind of funny. As I've gotten older, I have less favorites and more general, just, it's like hear something in the morning, and it's like, oh, there you go. Find something like that inspires you. But, I have to say, throughout the years, probably my ultimate all-time favorites were probably Matt Chamberlain, always dug him. Matt Cameron, from Soundgarden, of course, now Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
I was a Neil Peart fan for a long time, and you can't grow up working at some place called 2112 and not be into Neil Peart.
Goes without saying, right?
Yeah, you just that one was inherent. You have to have that one. It varies. Like I said, I've had a lot, and I'll say this too. I mean, throughout the course of my career, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of drummers in a lot of different capacities. I mean, from Charlie Adams, from Yanni, to Rob from Linkin Park. I mean, there's been tons of guys, through different genres that I've had the pleasure and opportunity of working with, and to say that, I kind of feel like saying any one particular guy is my favorite. It's probably unfair to every other guy who probably was my favorite at one point. So, I appreciate drummers playing, man.
I hear you.
If they're picking up sticks in the morning, then there you go. That's, that guy's my favorite then.
Well, I mean, it is what makes the world go round, for drummers, is just to know that somebody out there is picking up a pair of sticks and, going to the shed and trying to improve our craft.
Exactly.
That's what it's all about. And, I think that's what all of us try to do is just to try to get better as a player and as a musician every single day. So I appreciate your honesty in saying, I can't pick just one, because I can't either. And I don't know too many drummers that can say, oh, my all-time favorite is Neil, or my all-time favorite is Bonham. Because always, invariably, the next breath is, and, and they just keep,
totally.
they just keep going down the list. And there's so many guys out there. And, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, I mentioned Libor's name earlier, who is a dream artist. But I would be remiss in the same sentence if I didn't mention Scott Pilgrim, who is also a dream artist. And we talked about the Crop Circle and the Naughty Saucer. That's kind of his signature product in the Dream lines. If folks haven't checked out Scott's playing on his social media channels, do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Go check out Scott Pilgrim, because he is doing stuff that is just unnatural. It's insane.
And he does it with a smile that just makes you want to slap him a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only does he do it with a smile, he does it with with Pegasus, the adventure dog, his Chihuahua, in the pouch on his hoodie. He actually plays drums with his dog, which is, I don't even know what to say. I'm just going to say, go do an internet search for Scott Pilgrim. So the Dream artist roster is just chock full of talent. So by all means, visit the artist page when you go over to dreamcymbals.com. Brian, one last thing before we let you go and get back to your day. Any parting advice or words of wisdom for drummers? And I think you have a very unique perspective here, because not only are you a drummer, not only have you, worked as a drummer in bands, etc., but you're now on the gear side of the industry. So tell us, anything, whether it's how to become a better player or, how to form a relationship with a gear company. Just give us your parting advice or words of wisdom.
Well, there's probably two. One, from my good buddy Carl Peterson, from the first drum shop that I ever hung out in. Never dismiss children. You never know which ones are going to end up running a drum company. Always been one of my favorite. I love Carl to death. I actually still see him periodically at the show. So that was always one of my favorites, because he never treated me like a kid. He just let me hang out, let me do stuff. He talked to me like I was a person, and I learned a lot from him. And kind of the same thing as Steve Johnson from 2112. And it's again, same thing. He never treated me like a kid. He just treated me like somebody who's in the drum shop. And I always appreciated that. So, never dismiss kids. You never know what they're going to end up doing. The other side of it would be just never take a relationship for granted. Everybody you encounter throughout your life is going to play some pivotal point in it at some point, probably. Be it in music, be it in business. It's not something to take for granted. Everybody I've ever met in my career has helped me to where I am today. Guys like Josh Touchton from Natal, who I've known since he was the phone guy at Mapex when I was in my early 20s. There are people that stick throughout your life that, yes, in one way, shape, or form, you may not know it when you meet them, but they could be the stepping stone that makes the difference in getting where you want to go. And don't give up.
So true. Great words of wisdom and advice for our listeners. Brian, I can't thank you enough, for coming on the show and being our very first guest, B, for just being a drum brother to me. I love our, regular calls that we have, and we discuss, folks, it's not just about talking about cymbals, and when Brian talks about relationships, Brian talks to my 13-year-old daughter about all things Harry Potter, which is just so cool. It's
go U.S. Quidditch.
Yeah. Well, I know I took you from some of the catching up on some of the regional Quidditch matches today. So thanks for taking the time away from your other hobby. But I can't thank you enough just for hanging out and talking to me, all the time. And I know you're that way with all the guys on your artist roster, or just drummers or dealers in general. We really appreciate you just being a cool guy and helping everybody out. We thank you from the bottom of our heart.
Man, thank you for having me on the show. And, I'll be completely honest with you. This is a complete new experience for me. I've never done it. So thank you for popping my cherry.
Hey, no problem, man. Now I feel dirty. So, all right, folks, we're gonna let Brian go. And Brian, again, thanks so much for being on the show. If you don't mind to hold the line for just 1 second, we'll let you go. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Jamie. I appreciate it, man. Congrats on the podcast and good luck, brother.
Thanks so much. We'll see you.
You got it. Peace.
Bye. So that's going to do it for episode number 1 of the Drum Shuffle podcast. Special thanks to Brian LaRue and everyone at Dream Cymbals. Please visit them on the web at dreamcymbals.com. I hope that you found our podcast entertaining and helpful. If so, please do us a huge favor and leave us a review on iTunes or whichever service you're using to listen. I also hope that you'll take the time to reach out to us with questions or show suggestions at the Drum Shuffle Podcast at gmail.com. You can find us on the web at thedrumshuffle.com, and you can also find me over at jamieeads.com. Until next time, may your heads stay strong and your sticks never break. Cheers.